Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Podular Modcast. If you would like to help keep the LEDs blinking over here at Podular Modcast, head over to patreon.com/Podular Modcast. I just uploaded a video performance I did out in the woods when I went camping. I'm also going to be uploading a pretty thorough walkthrough of the new module that I'm going to be releasing early next year with After Later audio. But most importantly, I made some cassette tapes that I dubbed, and then I painted the packaging myself and did a painting for the cover. Also got a bunch of cables. I've got some cool blank panels. One of them is a Waveform magazine blank panel, and it's got Heimbach on the other side, so that's pretty cool. Recovery Effects Resist blank panel. I also have some 3U to 1U module adapters, some iron-on patches, one from Needham Woodworks, Waveform magazine patch. And then finally, I've got some really cool PodMod posters. The artwork here that John Herndon did. Those will come with Bandcamp download codes on the back. I've also got just so many stickers from pretty much any synth company you can think of. And there might be some other goodies. So if you want to be aware of when that happens, head over to patreon.com/Podular Modcast. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Podular Modcast. My name is Tim Held. This week we have Robert Fantinato from Waveshaper Media. They brought you the legendary film I Dream of Wires, and Robert is back to talk about his new film, Subotnick, Portrait of an Electronic Music Pioneer. We have a great discussion, and we are going to get into that momentarily. But first, I just wanted to show you that there are some screening dates coming up in the near future, and you can find a screening on the website, or you can book a screening on the website. And of course, that link is in the show description. All right, it's that time of the week again. Let's head over to patchworks.com and check out the used and vintage section. Well, there's a used Jomox X-Bass 09. I was actually playing with this the other day while I was in there. It's pretty sweet. Noise Engineering Ataraxic Iteratos. It's a super fun instrument to play. Oh, the Doepfer A160 clock divider, $60. I use this religiously. It does not come out of my case. Desktop Prophet 10. God, I'd love to have one of those. You guys, the keytar is still there. Oh, but you know what isn't there anymore? I caved. I got the Octopad, guys. I did it. I'll stop bugging you about it. But yes, head over to Patchworks. That's patchwerks.com. Got a couple shows coming up in the not too distant future. In fact, this coming Sunday, 11/26, if you're in the Tacoma area, I'll be playing at Real Art Tacoma with Runati, Pentacles, and Lousy Falcon. My good buddy David Lutz. $10, advance, $15 at the door. It is all ages, I believe, all night. Yeah, it's all ages, all night. And yeah, that should be pretty fun. I will also be playing in Everett, Washington, Saturday, December 9th at the Lucky Dime with Fortress, Changing Bodies, Max Steven, Null State, Echo Bass 1, and Quill. Another way you can support Podular Modcast is head on over to podularmodcast.com and go to the store section. It's wintertime. and all of our heads get cold in the wintertime. And look at all these awesome beanies and hoodies to keep us warm. There's all sorts of other fun stuff, perfect for the holidays. Who doesn't want Podular Modcast stuff for Christmas? But yeah, that's one way you can support the show. All right, let's get into this episode. Robert, thank you so much for your time today. It's awesome to finally meet you. And yeah, we have some cool stuff to talk about today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks.
Yeah, so we're mainly here to talk about the new Morton Subotnick film that you have. It's been in the can for a bit, I think, but is about to premiere. And you also did I Dream of Wires, correct?
Oh, a long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah, so I kind of wanted to start there because when I started this show, now almost 6 years ago, um, that had already been out, but I think it was already out for a handful of years by that point. And obviously, like right when I got into modular, that was one of the first purchases. I got it on DVD, and I think a lot of people, who started their modular journey within the last 5 to 8, 10 years, I think that was it was like the only thing that was around for people to watch to really, nerd out on something that they were so excited about. So, yeah, I just wanted to first off say that I'm a huge fan of that film, and yeah, that's so cool
Great. Excellent.
that it exists.
Yeah,
And
we kind of did that. My partner, Jason Am is the guy I work with on all these projects, and he's also. I'm not. I'm an amateur musician. I dabble in this stuff, but I don't dare think of myself as an actual musician. But Jason Am is also goes by the name of Solvent, and if you're into synth pop, he's my personal favorite
okay,
artist who works in that genre these days, and definitely worth checking out. I think I originally approached him to do the soundtrack, but he ended up becoming the producer because he had so many connections in the music world. And we started that project back in 2010, so we were really at the beginnings. I mean, it wasn't the beginning, but it was
but it was
right where
close.
it was just
Yeah.
starting to get into the mainstream a bit. So we caught that, and I think we were. I would not hesitate to say we had some effect on making a bit more mainstream because the
Oh, I
film
think
caught the
so.
attention, for example, of Roland. Roland ordered 40 copies of the film and it went everywhere. And shortly afterwards, they started putting out Eurorack stuff. So
Yeah.
that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I mean, you had Trent Reznor on it, which that couldn't have hurt. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that
I
was pretty
kind of
awesome.
yeah, that is amazing. I kind of wanted to just to kind of get the history on that. Like, what was the inception of the idea, and then had follow through to finishing, and then up to present.
Yeah, it was actually, I'll give you a bit of my personal history, my connection with synthesizers. It really started when I had my very first job at the public library. I grew up in the suburbs, but the record collection in the suburban libraries were actually sent from the central branch. And I think there was someone very enlightened working in the downtown branch because they sent a copy of Switched on Bach and
Uh huh.
also Morton Subotnick's Sidewinder.
Okay.
And
Oh,
really,
I just picked that up. I haven't listened to it
yeah,
yet, but I found it on vinyl, and I wanna. I'm
great. Yeah.
excited to check it out.
Yeah, it's a pretty amazing piece of music, but so out there, even by today's standards. I know a lot of people would find listening to Mort's music pretty difficult. And so at that age, I was exposed really to the two sides of, where electronic music went. It was, on one hand, a new sound palette that musicians, established musicians, could use to add to what they were already doing. On the other hand, Mort was like the original bedroom producer, and what he was doing was very much punk aesthetic. It was
Hmm.
a device that anyone could use to express themselves musically without having musical training. So having those two things, that just was always in the back of my mind. And in the '80s, I used to play synths, had a couple of analog synths, which I still have a Sequential Circuits Pro 1 and a Korg Poly 6. I still have those two synths, and I used to play Skinny Puppy covers and Kraftwerk covers with my
Uh-huh.
friends, and also some original stuff. And then I kind of gave up music for a very, very long time. It was basically working in the film business and as an editor and doing technical stuff. And how I got back into it was my older son, my son Aiden, who he started getting interested in music, and we started dabbling with some virtual synths and doing some digital stuff. And then one day he sent me a picture of a brand new Buchla 200E system, which is this gigantic
Uh-huh.
pump, and I was like, wow, I haven't seen anything like that since, I was a kid. And, I had never had experience with modular synths. It was always just, analog keyboards and then some digital stuff. And then kind of getting back into it was all the virtual stuff, laptop stuff. And I was like, wow, people are still making, I started, thinking this was so interesting that people were making modular gear again. And I started looking into it. And I thought it was such a fascinating thing. And it reminded me a bit of the revival that was going on with vinyl around that time. People getting back
Right.
into
Yeah.
vinyl, just this idea of sort of going back to earlier technologies, that there were definitely some things about those technologies that we lost when we gave them up. And I just became interested in it. And the only other documentary film stuff I did myself, I had made a short film a few years earlier called Echoes of Forgotten Places, which was all about urban exploration.
Oh,
It was,
cool.
I think, one of the first films about that. Nowadays, I mean, it's all over YouTube.
Uh-huh.
Uh, but I had made this short film. This was like 20, gosh, this would have been, wow, so long ago, 2004.
Okay.
And I enjoyed doing that. I mean, I wasn't really a filmmaker. I was more in the technical side, but I thought this is kind of an interesting topic to look into. And so it never was supposed to be as big as it got. It
Right.
started
Yeah.
off just kind of, I went to see the only guy I knew here in Toronto that was making this stuff was Bruce Duncan, who was responsible for ModCan. ModCan is this very high
Yeah.
end stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he had made some Euro stuff later, but at the time when I went to see him, I think he was just starting to design some Eurorack stuff. He was still making this sort of full size System A and System B. It was his own proprietary stuff. He had built equipment for Daft Punk and Dead Mouse and all, So he was the only guy I knew, and I just went to see him and shoot some stuff, and then just kind of snowballed. It got
That's
so
that's what
crazy.
modular does to people, right?
Well, the film kind of did the same thing, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
what ended up happening is it went from a very small thing to something big almost overnight because I had put together sort of a teaser reel, but I wasn't going to show anybody, and I ended up sharing it with the folks at I think it was Matrix Synth, the website Matrix Synth, and he went and posted it. It wasn't really supposed to be posted, but it got a huge reaction, and suddenly it really took off, and everybody started getting interested in the project. And Morton Subotnick was one of the earlier interviewees. Actually, he was one of the first people I went to see back in 2010. Um, and just having him on the roster right away gave the film some credibility. And then a lot of other people started coming on board, and I got to meet all my heroes. John Fox from Ultravox and his solo stuff, which is totally pivotal in my life, and Gary Newman, and all these people is pretty crazy.
That is so
So yeah,
cool.
that was a lot of fun, and I've met so. I mean, every time I run into somebody and the discussion about synths comes up, they've all seen the film. It's pretty amazing.
That is so cool. Yeah, and I kind of have like two directions I want to go with this. But like first off, like so that film, that I would, modular has like had these waves of like, its resurgence or whatever, with Eurorack becoming, you know, not like an official format, but like multiple companies making stuff. And I would say in the last 6-7 years has seen another spike after that initial like run. And I feel like your film was, it contributed to that first spike. I'm curious, like, how, like, what is your what is your perspective or take on the state of modular since that film was released up until today?
Well, I think it's really more become just a tool for music makers, as opposed to sort of a curiosity that seemed to be more like a hobby. I think it's
Hmm.
definitely become a tool that you see a lot of people using. I mean, one of the original briefs I had when I was kind of putting together the I Dream of Wires project was, that this was a curious kind of activity by non-musicians. And in fact, a lot of people we talked to were not really musicians and just loved. It was almost like a form of therapy, or a sort of
Hmm.
meditation, to do this stuff. But now it's it seems like it's just a tool that's used by a lot of mainstream musicians, and it's really become just another sound palette source for people. So I'm honestly, I'm not really sure what's going on with the non-musicians anymore. Since I made the film, I've kind of moved on. I haven't really been paying attention to what's going on in the forums and all that sort of subculture, or going to synth meets. I don't really do that stuff anymore. After we finished the film, I got sort of pulled off in other directions. I mean, I still have Eurorack stuff myself, and I'm still trying to do some music projects, but the film stuff is just kind of overwhelming right now. So
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
not
you're
really
about to
sure. I
be
mean,
really pulled back into that subculture, I think, with the release of this film.
yeah, I mean, although the focus of Subotnick is not so much gear oriented, for
That's
sure.
true. That's true.
And,
Yeah.
and in fact, in some ways, it's not particularly orientated towards exploring his music in particular, because his music is still pretty difficult for most people, and it's really more about his life philosophy and his ideas around art and living a good life. I think
Hmm.
that's really what the focus is, and I'm hoping it's going to have some mainstream appeal in that way.
Well, I love that because, starting the show, I started it because, I caught the bug and I just really wanted to talk to people who actually wanted to engage in conversations about, modular rather than just be talked at by, a nerd who just found a new thing to be into. And of course I still like gear, and but that's the tool side, and I'm much more interested in the artistic side. And I too have talked a lot about, how it this format of creative expression has led to personal and spiritual, if you will, growth for myself. And I've had a lot of people share that sentiment or say that in their own way. So I'm really happy to see this film doing what you just described, and not just being, like for the in crowd, as far as, like this is a super esoteric thing and then you have to be in on something to know, like you said, like a more wide appeal. And with somebody like, more, it's just, you know, there's a handful of people out there right now who deserve this kind of film to be made about them, and more people, I feel, need to learn about Mort and his influence, and like you said, his life philosophy and everything. So yeah, that's awesome to hear. And I'm really excited to see how the world, takes it in and embraces it, especially our community, the modular community. um so do you
He's
have any, what go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, he's definitely got a. I mean, I think he's quite surprised by how interest in him has really spiked recently. When I went to
Hmm.
see him in 2010, he had just, after 20 years of more or less not a lot of people really interested in what he was up to, told me that he's getting all these requests from people to come and play, and he doesn't really know how to fit in, because he'd be getting requests to play at different festivals, electronic music festivals, and he would sort of listen to what people were doing. He didn't feel he belonged there at all.
Hmm.
But people seem to, it's gone to sort of, he's kind of an oddity, to now I think there's an audience that really actually understands what he's about and what he was trying to do.
Yeah,
So that's definitely evolved, and I think it's really great that we were able um, to do this film at this stage in his life. I mean, he is 90, but
it's
in
still
some ways
spry and like
it's amazing. He's actually I'm actually picking him up tomorrow at the airport here in Toronto because he's doing a show, and then we're going to be showing the film on Friday.
nice. That's
And
cool.
he's determined to keep going.
That is,
He's
it's
really an
so funny.
inspiration to me. Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm gonna try to tackle this wide idea here. So forgive me if it's not so eloquent, but what you just described with him kind of being more of an obscure figure for a while, and then all of a sudden later in his life, this kind of resurgence. I've talked to Suzanne Ciani a couple times.
Oh yeah.
She's had a similar story, and I think not that Suzanne's a little different because she kind of went into the new age thing for a while and got a new audience, and then you know she has expressed many times, not just to me, but um publicly, how grateful and but like surprised she was that all these new younger people were coming out for the stuff that she at up to that point didn't feel that she was very known for. And I think it's really strange to me. I've been thinking about this a lot, just doing the show over the last 6 years, talk to 200 plus people. um it's strange, like with the modular stuff, especially the Buchla stuff, but Wendy Carlos doing this stuff with the Moog and that whole side. Back to your John Cages, and then Pauline Oliveros, like all these very, very like forward thinking, innovative, like figures that were shaping the musical art to come down the pipeline. But then we get this digital stuff that comes in, and it's exciting because it's new, and it's like, oh look, you can get a trumpet sound. It doesn't sound anything like trumpets, but then with the nature of how digital technology has this exponential growth, I feel like we fell out of love with that in a couple decades, and then we wanted to have this almost pick up where I don't want to say we, because more as just a collective artistic musical community kind of picked. Wait, all right, we have the best samples in the world. We can hit a button on our keyboard and make it sound like an orchestra. That's not so interesting anymore. So now this other stuff gets picked up, and it's just so it like it's heartwarming, and it's cool to see that these people who, I don't know, I mean, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but like from my perspective, looking back, we're like almost like left behind by this thing that almost, I wouldn't say it kind of, it halted the progression. It put a roadblock up on the paths that they were forging for, creative expression through electronic music. And it's just cool to see them get their comeuppance, for lack of a better word, or like it's just an interesting phenomenon, I think.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think well, the internet um, has opened up everything. It's so easy to get into everything, and I see young people all the time walking around with Joy Division T-shirts and stuff. It's pretty cool
Hmm. Hmm.
that they get to sort of explore on their own where the origin of this stuff comes from. And if you look deep enough, if you're into Aphex Twin, you're going to eventually end up at Mort, I think.
Yeah, definitely, for
So,
sure.
one of
Yeah.
those. So yeah, I mean, I think it's really exciting that this awareness is happening. The curious thing, of course, I mean, Mort was involved in digital exploring electronic music digitally way early. I mean, he was at the IRCAM Center in Paris, working with PDP-6 computer or whatever it was that they had there, and working in digital, for years and years. Um, but I think I think what's attracting people, of course, to the analog stuff is just that immediacy, and it's kind of curious because Mort had gotten back into using the Buchla, the 200E, and had been using it up till I had seen him a few years ago when we wrapped up shooting with the film, and he had proclaimed that he was retiring.
Mm.
But he didn't retire, and this new piece of his is actually completely off his laptop.
Oh, cool.
And what he's doing is he's got um, dozens of virtual Buchla complex oscillator plugins running. So he's able to achieve something he could never do with an analog system. But it's still, the methodology is still based in the original way. So
That's
he's,
cool.
it's not like he's always been open to anything.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's myself personally too. I mean, I just love the tactile interface of analog and the unpredictable nature of it. I think for this piece, though, for Mort, he had a very specific thing in mind that could only be achieved with digital technology right now. So it's
I
quite
mean,
fascinating.
yeah. I mean, I can't throw any shade or judgment at that because if you've been using this instrument for so long, and then all of a sudden technology says, "Hey, you know that idea that you've probably had a couple times where like, what if I filled a whole like car garage full of these and somehow could manage it all?" Well, now you can do that on a computer. So, yeah, why not take advantage of like not I asked Todd Barton, how long he thought it would take to master the vocal music easel, and he said he didn't think that it could ever truly be mastered because just the nature of how it works. And so, I don't think Mort would say he's a master, but he's probably closer to, just about anybody else living today that could be considered as such. So, you know,
Oh yeah, I mean, I've watched him patching a large Buchla system. Oh gosh, I'm trying to remember. The name is escaping me now. I can't believe. Sorry, I've still got a bit of jet lag, but
yeah.
Um, there's a fellow who makes some Buchla inspired modules, and he recently moved to Berlin, and I'm
Is it
trying to remember
verbose?
his. Yes, exactly.
Mark
Okay,
verbose?
so
Yeah, yeah.
when Mark was still in New York, we had gone there with Mort and spent an afternoon patching Mark's giant Buchla system, which is full of amazing stuff. I mean, there's some 100 model stuff in there and 200 stuff. There's stuff there that still says San Francisco Tape Music Center Incorporated.
Oh my God,
He's got
that's
this
so cool.
monster,
That is so
yeah, and he's
cool.
got this monster system, and it was quite fascinating to watch Mort. He just got in there, and he was able to make these incredibly subtle, adjustments to get just the right sounds. And he's definitely still the master, I think, of the Buchla.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's so cool. It's funny that you bring up Mark because I have yet to reach out to Mark to ask him to be on the show, which I really want to do. And I don't know why, but I'm like super intimidated, mostly because I don't have any of his modules. So I feel like a little guilty about that. But I also like, you know, there's just certain people whose minds intimidate me and feel like I can't hang with them, but I need to remedy that. Um,
Oh, well, he was one of the first, when I had gone down, the first sort of major shooting spree I went on for I Dream of Wires back in 2010, and this is before I had anyone helping me. It was just myself. I went down to New York and I had lined up that interview with Mort, but I also asked online, who should I talk to in New York? And one of the first names that came up was Mark. And I went to see Mark, and he was very, very gracious and spent plenty of time with me. And he hooked me up with a few other people. Well, I said, "Oh, you should go see this guy." And he phoned them up and stuff. So, oh no, he's a
yeah,
sweetheart, that guy.
yeah, and I don't I should be over that by now because I've learned that lesson time and time again with people from our community who are just so
uh,
sweet and
it,
gracious.
it's
Like,
true, yeah.
um, so yeah, Mark, if you happen to be listening, I'm gonna send a message to you soon if you would be interested in
I
coming
think
on.
I think he just finished doing like one of these Iron Man things.
Oh wow, okay,
Yeah.
cool.
So
Well,
he's
that's also
yeah,
intimidating because
yeah,
I
for sure.
played drums for exercise.
Right. I usually
um,
go for a walk around the block. That's about it.
yeah, yeah. Um, so I'm curious. and this is, this is half cheeky playing around, but like, is there any desire or plan to do Still Dreaming of Wires or anything like that to like update it or anything like that?
Well, there is a version of the film called the Hardcore Edition. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
I'm not sure.
That's the 3-hour version of it. That was actually it's an interesting way the film came out. It originally came out in this 3-hour version, and then we cut it down to about an hour and a half, I think, or something like that. That became the theatrical version, and then there was a home video version, which we had a different narrator. So there's actually three versions of it, and a lot of that material did end up on our YouTube channel on Waveshaper Media or Waveshaper TV. And we have a lot of episodes on there. We That was something that Jason and I were doing for a while, and then we just got too busy. But there's tons of stuff
Awesome.
on there.
I didn't realize that.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
gonna
yeah,
check
yeah.
that
Just
stuff out. That's so
yeah,
cool.
Waveshaper TV. I mean, we've got a 3-part series on Laurie Spiegel, and Laurie's
Oh,
one of my
nice.
absolute favorite
Yes.
composers. She's amazing. We've got a Suzanne Ciani thing on there, and all kinds of stuff. And there's also a few bits from. I'm not sure if you're aware, but I've got another film that we're trying to finish. Now that Mort's film is done, I'm going to be moving my attention, and that's to Electronic Voyager, which is the Bob Moog film that we did with Bob Moog's daughter,
Uh-huh.
Michelle Moog.
Okay,
And that
very cool.
we unwisely, well, I'll tell you, one of the things about these projects, it, we had a lot of trouble. It's a difficult topic to raise money through finding broadcasters. It's not really something that's apparent to your average broadcaster why anyone would be interested in this stuff.
Mhm.
Um, Mort, being even though he's such a pivotal figure in music history, it's not something most people, most if you go to a broadcaster and tell them about this project, they don't get it, right? Most of them don't understand it, and so um, when we decided to do the film about Mort, it was mainly because we had shown I Dream of Wires in Berlin, and he came along to do a live show in conjunction with that screening. And we spent some time with him and realized, boy, this guy is so interesting. Because when I went to see him the first time, it was just for the interview, but just chatting with him casually. And so we thought, we should just make a film about him, but we couldn't get any funding for it. So we did crowdfunding and raised some money to at least get the film shot. But films are way more expensive than most people understand, and we just thought, it's better we just get this material shot and in the can, and then we'll try to figure out a way to finish it. And that's why it took so long. And it was exactly the same problem with the Moog film. We wanted to tell the story of Bob's struggles in the world of business and how he was really not compatible as a business person, and the ups and downs of his career and
I
all
mean,
the
yeah, I
people.
can relate to
Oh
that.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's quite a story. It's a Greek tragedy. It's just something. When eventually we get the film out, you'll understand what I'm saying.
Mhm.
But one of the problems with that film, again, um, if we had waited until we had all the funding in place, and that can take years sometimes, to get something like that happening, we would have lost a lot of the people who are still alive. In fact, I think 7 or 8 of the people in the film are no longer with us,
Oh my
but we
god.
have their stories, and they were very important people.
Mhm.
And so that project, I know there's a lot of people out there who uh, contributed to the crowdfunding campaign of Electronic Voyager that are patiently waiting. And I can tell you that the film is actually done, but we are still working on getting the money for the music rights and various things of that nature. And it's quite a lot of money. I mean,
Mhm.
so that it's in the can, it's done, and it's a great story. And I'm glad that we went ahead and did it when we did it because nobody else was going to do it. And if we had waited, we would have lost half the people in the story. So
Mhm.
that's just the
Wow.
perils of filmmaking.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That is, yeah. It's just, I mean, I make my own little short films and I'm, relatively new as a quote unquote filmmaker and I do my editing for this show um, and it's so funny to how surprised people are when you say, well, if you shoot, if you want a 5 minute film, you're shooting like 20 hours of footage at least. And then, you're spending 60 hours like just going through it to find the parts that you want. And then you got it, it's just like then color and then sound, like just like there's so just the technical side is so daunting, but then you start adding, more moving parts, the people that you need to interview, the like you were mentioning, the getting the licensing for the music. It's just like it's a Herculean task, and
Yeah.
sometimes like a Sisyphean task, it's just like
Well, one of the big issues with trying to get Mort's film finished was, his story is too complex to encapsulate in one film, and we really had to figure out what was the focus that made the most sense to explore with the average person, because Mort, besides his work in electronic music, has been involved in a lot of different things. He was involved in the creation of, I think it was called Director when it was first developed. It eventually became Macromedia. Um, what's it, Director? Yeah, I can't remember. This is early computer stuff.
uh-huh.
But it was, multimedia authoring software. I think Macromedia Director became Flash or something like that. So he goes all the way back to the origins, and he was
Wow.
working he was working on developing that at MIT. Right. So there's that. He was involved in he was part of the very first group of faculty at Cal Arts, which is a very innovative art school in
Yeah,
California.
I think I've probably had at least
Yeah.
20, but maybe more, either
Oh, for sure.
previous students or graduates on the show. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so he was involved in that. He was involved in the Electric Circus in New York, which was a very innovative uh, club with multimedia happening and all this kind of stuff. He was involved in children's CD-ROM software. He worked on probably one of the very first CD-ROMs from the Voyager company. It was Morton Subotnick's Making Music, which was, like one of the absolute first CD-ROMs.
Wow,
He
that is
also
crazy.
created, yeah, I mean, so it goes on, and it's like, well, how can you tell all that without it getting diluted? So we had to go out there and basically shoot everything, and it's hundreds of people that we
And
talked to, and then we had
travel
to,
and yeah, oh
yeah,
my gosh.
so
Yeah.
it's huge, right? And so we ended up having to try to focus the film. And so what I did in the film is it's really two parallel lines. There's the lead up to the release of Silver Apples of the Moon, which was his landmark recording, his first full length recording that got a lot of attention. It came out just before Switched on Bach, and it was a number one on the classical charts.
I love that. That's
Uh,
so funny.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so everything that he did after that, it's just long and complex. But we thought, that's really the heart of the story. And I kind of was inspired, believe it or not, from watching the Twisted Sister documentary, because they tell the story of their struggle right up until they release their massive hit, and that was it. That's where they stopped the story, because the rest of it is not quite as compelling. It's really about the struggle. So I felt that Mort's sort of struggling with his he was a prodigy on the clarinet, and was
Hmm.
the youngest member of a professional orchestra. And he had this whole career in classical music, and he basically turned his back on all of that to pursue this idea that he had. And that to me was really the heart of the story. And all the other accomplishments he did is something that, people might want to check out after they see the film.
Yeah, for
But yeah,
sure.
I mean that making these films, it's yeah, I mean the documentary is a weird thing, because you just don't know what you're going to have until you go out and shoot. You just try to shoot everything.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I mean, I know there is a quote unquote writing process as far as as going into documentary filmmaking, but and then there's the finding the story and the edit approach and all of this, but like, yeah, it's got to just be exciting but equally terrifying to like go into something this massive not really knowing how it's going to all be, or did you do all this research and then have an idea of how you're going to stitch things together, or was it a little bit of both? Like,
Yeah, I mean, I did my best to read up on everything I could. I mean, that really, uh, Jason and I lined up all these interviews with this, making sure that we captured all these pivotal points. But then once we've got all that, you're almost starting from scratch again because now you've got all this material and you've got to try to figure it out. And the technique I use is you have a stack of index cards where you've got basically every topic, every person, and you just try to figure out what the storyline is.
yeah,
But I mean, one of the things about these projects, it's a good thing and also a dangerous thing when you're working on a completely independent project that nobody has a gun at your head, waiting for. There's no deadline. You can take your time to try to figure it out, and that gives you that freedom to try to condense it into a statement of some sort that makes sense. I mean, I work in broadcast as well, and so I also do projects where you've got only X amount of time to deliver, and it's a completely different way of doing stuff. So these projects are crazy because they can drag on and on, but they also allow you to really do it with an eye on being as honest as possible and
yeah.
not compromising. I mean, I Dream of Wires was a uncompromised project. It was really for synth nerds, but it had a lot of a lot of people saw it. I was kind of surprised. Somebody once posted on Facebook that they were on Air Emirates, and it was showing on the they
Oh,
had it
that's
on the plane. It's kind of
that's
insane to
awesome.
me.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. And one of my absolute favorite pictures that somebody sent me. There was a screening somewhere in rural Mexico, and they
Wow.
sent me a photograph of a whole bunch of people sitting out in a field with a big screen, and it said, "I Dream of Wires," and it's all these people in a village watching this film. And I thought, wow, that's crazy.
That is so cool.
But yeah, yeah, that was
Just
great.
the unexpected things that you get out of, putting the time in on something like this. I love that. Um, so speaking of time, this is flying by. We're already over a half an hour, and I know you've got a lot going on. But I'm curious. And this will be a bit of a gaseous, nebulous question, but I kind of want to hear anything that you would like to say, or whatever this comes to makes come to mind for you. But like, the time that you spent with Mort making this and up till now, and like, just what's this experience been like? What's been the thesis statement of the experience of you doing this project?
Mort has to be one of the most inspiring people I've ever met. I like to think of him as like a father figure in some ways.
Yeah.
And it's also very surreal for me because he's been a name that's been in my life since I was 14, like I mentioned.
Hmm.
This name was,
That is
was
so
always
cool.
there in the background.
That is so cool.
And yeah, so I mean, having a chance to become, friends with him has been really wonderful. And he's just such an interesting guy and a warm man, very unpretentious, a very deep thinker. We have all kinds of, I'm come from a working class background and I'm fairly well read. I went to university and everything, but I'm not an intellectual in any way. But we have some, he's, we have some really interesting conversations. And I before I got into filmmaking, I was in astrophysics in university, and so he's interested in all that stuff. I mean, we have big discussions about the nature of the cosmos, and he's just such an interesting guy. And also, again, I mean, he's a super intellectual, way beyond my capacities, but he doesn't make you feel that way. He's just a very open guy and wonderful. And I had a chance to spend some time with him when he was teaching at NYU too, and could see the passion he has for education for young people. So just such an inspiring guy because I think he sometimes I get I I've had similar temptations to go off and just do commercial work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's part of his story that, being somebody in the early or the mid late 60s with access to a synthesizer, there were all kinds of opportunities to make a ton of money doing really simple things, but it was so novel that there were all kinds of opportunities to make all kinds of money. And he talks about that in the film, how he was really struggling with and that he had to walk away from that because it was too tempting, and that he was getting more joy out of doing things that he was making pennies on, and so I mean that was very inspiring, and he's done fine for himself since then. But just staying focused on some kind of mission, I think, was really inspiring. And I hope to keep making these small independent films, even though they're a real struggle. Um, I've still got to pay my bills and everything, and I do other commercial work on the side. But really, um, just finding something to devote yourself to, and keeping true to that is been the biggest takeaway I've had from hanging out with Mort. And
I
he's just
love
a
that.
wonderful guy.
That's it's such a gift, and it's generous, and it's not just a one-way street, because obviously, like, you're being generous with your time, and also, like, making this film, you know to, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but in a way, like a way of documenting and preserving his legacy for, when we're gone, when you and I are gone, and people can keep checking it out. So that's just really, really sweet to hear. And it's funny, like, I feel like I have like a tenth of a percent of what you not a tenth of a percent, because for any reason other than I don't get to spend as much time. But I'm not sure if Todd Barton.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I feel that way. Like, Todd's been on the show a couple times, and we have hung out, I think, 3 or 4 times, together at things we were both like on the bill for or something. And he's just one of those people, again, very much like how you're describing Mort, just extraordinarily smart, but also doesn't make you feel like you can't keep up with him, even though I probably can't. Um, so generous with his time, and just such a passion to just share this knowledge, enthusiasm, and love. Um, and I feel like, out of the, I have taken stuff away from short conversations with Todd that have stayed with me for a really long time. And I actually told him that the last time we were hanging out, because like I was like mediate. I don't know if that's the word, but he was doing a talk and I was recording it for the show. So I was kind of presenting him to the audience and then asking questions and stuff. And he brought, and I can't think of it right now, and I don't want to try to meander too far, but yeah, there was something that he had mentioned, and then a light bulb went off in my head, and I was kind of like to him, like, you were talking about this, and it made me think of this, and this was 5 years ago we had our first talk, and this one thing, it's not just in my creative approach to synthesis, but this piece of wisdom, about listening. It was most about listening and presence and stuff. Like, it went straight into the core of the equation of trying to figure out the best way to be in this reality or something. Not to get, this sounds very heady and kind of maybe sappy or overly sentimental, but I can't express it without sounding that way. And yeah, the way you were just describing your experience made me think of that a little bit. So that's cool.
Yeah, I mean they are universal things that anyone can apply to whatever they're into. And just, I think what inspires me about Mort is just a life well lived, a life with purpose. And,
Mm-hmm.
it really, makes you take stock of, the kinds of things that sometimes cloud your mind, and try to give yourself some clarity sometimes, and some courage, to keep trying to do something that enhances your enjoyment of being alive, with the
Oh
little
yeah.
time we have.
Yeah. It's really a beautiful thing. And kind of going back to your description of these kind of surprising things that you hadn't imagined happening as a result of the film. When I started the show, I had an idea of what it could be if it became successful, and what it actually turned out to be, and for lack of a better term, what I have gotten out of it has been so much more rewarding and meaningful than any sort of financial or like status gain or something like that. It's the relationships that I've been able to make, and some
Oh
of the
yeah, I mean,
closest people have been because they were guests on the show, and now we're really close friends. And yeah,
meeting cool people has been my number one
yeah,
motivation. It's just a great excuse to meet all the heroes from my childhood, and it's been really wonderful. Working on the Moog film was really interesting too because I got to meet Jean-Michel Jarre, and
nice.
even he saw I Dream of Wires. He didn't realize we were the same guys until
Yeah, yeah.
Michelle mentioned it. He came over and he was all excited, and that really felt good. And I've met Rick Wakeman, and I was a big Prague fan when I was a kid, so all that stuff's great. And again, something about synth people, they seem to be very nice people, and I don't know what it is. That's definitely a topic to explore, but I don't know what it is about synth people that makes them.
I've
There's some very
talked about
interesting
this a
things.
lot. I have some
Yeah.
theories, but yeah, go ahead.
Well, even again, I've had more than one person talk about how they use the machine to reinvent themselves. There's
I like
something about
that. I like that.
synthesizers. Yeah, more talks about that, but I've met a lot of people, who see the synthesizer as kind of this transformative thing. I don't hear a lot of guitarists talk that way. It's just interesting. I don't know what it is. That could be a topic for some other film.
I think yeah. I think, well, part of just what you were saying with it, I think there's a level of collaboration, there's a level of surrender that you have to, learn, or become comfortable with, in regards to expectation versus outcome. If you play a G chord through on a guitar through a twin reverb, it's going to sound like but if you go in to make your patch or something, you might not get to where you want to go. And if you become comfortable with that, you may find yourself in a cool place that is, way better than the place that you thought you were going to go, and something you never could have imagined. And I think that translates, that sound like there are life experiences that are like that oftentimes, more often than not, from my experience. And I think just by doing this regularly, it's a mini practice of sorts. Like I've talked about a patch being a Tibetan mandala, it's like the sand painting that's wiped away at the end or something. People are probably very tired of me saying that. um but going back to the idea of what is it about synth people, because what this is something I experienced. I started Podular Modcast as somebody who had been into modular for a couple months and had a handful of modules, and I knew nothing about this world. Like it was all fresh, but I that was kind of the conceit of the show. Okay, let's learn about this with me. Come on my journey. And I was very, very intimidated to ask people to come on, and Div Kid Ben reached out to me when he saw that I announced on Twitter or something, "Hey, I'm doing this show." And he reached out to me in a private DM, said, "Hey, I think this is cool if you ever want a guest or something." And I was like, "Oh, I was going to wait a year until I had like something to back me up to ask." So yeah, he was one of my and that has just echoed throughout. So like, like I should, like talking about Mark Verbos earlier, like what I know this now. I shouldn't feel this this like nervousness about approaching somebody. But I think maybe there's a couple reasons I think that might be, and I'd be interested to hear what you think of this. But one, I think there there's no rock stardom there's no worldwide superstar status to be gained. Um, and I think people, if that's your goal, this isn't the world you're going to be gravitating towards. I also think that, especially in terms of like modular synthesis or experimental music, um, it's obscure enough and niche enough to where when you find somebody else who is into it, you can't afford to be standoffish or too cool for school. But not I don't even think that's a conscious thing. I think it's more of there's just an enthusiastic spirit about it because there's deep love for it, and to be able to share that love with other people is relatively rare in your everyday world. So I think that's a huge part of it. You can't be a rock star, and if you want to come into the synth room, then we want you there because we want to talk. We want to talk to you just as bad as you want to talk to us, type thing. And I that's just kind of something I've been pontificating on over the last 6 years or so doing this.
Yeah, I mean, I think in particular with modular stuff that you don't have that keyboard in front of you and the metaphor of what the keyboard represents. Instead, you've got this blank slate. You've got you know, uh, a medium without a message built in. This is something Mort talks a lot about. Marshall McLuhan, and how the medium is the message, but with a modular, there is no built-in message. It's sort
That's a
of this
good,
blank.
yeah, I like that.
Yeah, it's a blank slate. You approach this thing and it's completely without any sort of preconception. When you have a keyboard in front of you, you want to start playing traditional music. I mean, it sort of invites that, even if you can do whatever you want with it. Just the metaphor of the keyboard kind of locks you into that in a way. And I think the thing with modular is you've just got this thing that allows you to be musically expressive, but in a very individualistic way, and also a way that doesn't require. I mean, sure, there's prodigies out there, I'm sure, but who know how to patch. But anybody can get some pleasure and enjoyment out of this thing, even if they don't
Yeah.
know anything about music, about notes. It's just this machine that you interact with. And again, Marshall McLuhan says that whole thing about we build the machines and the machines build us.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got this thing patched, but you're getting something back, and it's definitely fascinating. And I think it attracts people that are just really explorers, and you tend to gravitate to other explorers. I think that's probably why we get
Yeah.
along so well with each other.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we're coming around to an hour here, so I wanted to give you the last bit to, you know, let everybody know when, where, how to see the film. I think it's premiering as of today, in 3 days on Friday. Is that
On
right?
Friday,
Or
yeah.
yeah.
Sorry. It's Friday is when Mort's doing a live show here in Toronto, and then Saturday night we're going to be showing it at the Hot Dog Cinema in Toronto. There are some other screenings coming up in the U.S. We're trying to book the film. Mort's doing a few more dates in the U.S. He's playing in L.A., San Francisco, San Antonio. I'm not sure where else, but I've got some dates lined up at theaters around the time he'll be there. But once this whole, like, I'm involved in organizing the concert, so I'm a little swamped right now. But we are going to be doing probably about 6 months of theatrical screenings, and then hopefully it'll be streaming at some point, home video release at some point. I'm not really sure yet. It's hard to
Okay.
know, but right
Well,
now we are self-distributing the film. So if anybody wants to see the film in a particular place, best thing to do is to go to our website, waveshapermedia.com, and just contact us there and let us know, oh, you'd love to see the film, and we will try to see what we can do. Or if you have a particular cinema that you think might be open to this sort of thing, we will try and get a screening happening.
awesome.
Um, Hopefully, sometime next year, we will do a streaming release. We're not sure who's going to pick it up yet. We're still working on that.
Awesome. Well, that's the good thing about the self-release is you can kind of
Yeah.
do it in different ways along the way until it's fully out there. So cool. And I'll put the links to everything in the show description so people can check that out. And then finally, I always like to give the last few minutes to let the guests scream anything they would like from the modular mountaintops, and it can, yeah, whatever that makes conjures up in your mind.
Oh gosh. I mean,
Yeah, on the spot,
I
that, so yeah, but it's
oh yeah. Well, I'm, I'm still exploring the modular world myself. I've had to take a bit of a break. I get too much into different things. I'm also into astronomy and astrophotography, which is a very, very deep and
mhm.
complex endeavor. And I've had to put all that stuff aside for the last 6 months to concentrate on getting the film out. But I'm feeling the itch to get back into doing some sound work and you know I'm also trying to do some. Well, when you see the film, you'll see all this liquid light imagery that my son Aiden does, and so
Nice.
we are collaborating on a installation piece. So I'm hoping to sort of dabble in in some of that sort of stuff using modular equipment to create soundscapes and stuff like that.
Nice. Okay.
So it hasn't. I haven't gotten bored with it. It's been very, very exciting. I never thought I would ever have a chance in my life to use a modular synthesizer. I mean, modular synthesizer to me was something I saw on the cover of those records so many years ago.
Yeah.
When I finally got my hands on a synthesizer, it was a Sequential Circuits Pro 1, which I still love to use.
Nice. Actually,
Um,
I've got one. You
oh,
can see
fantastic.
this
Yeah.
right here.
Yeah.
That's a
Okay.
Pro One. It's not mine. It's my friend's, but I've had it for a while.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
barely used it. I need to mess with it.
there was a long period of time in the 90s when I was actually playing the drums and in a sort of a slowcore. I don't know if that word means anything to people.
Oh
I'm a
yeah,
bit of an older guy, so
yeah,
I was really into the Red House Painters and bands like that, and I was totally not into electronic music for such a long time, and it really kind of hit me again in the late 2020, the late 2000s, early 2010s, and now I'm just like totally obsessed with it again.
yeah,
And it's wonderful that I can explore it with these new tools.
yeah.
They're still extremely exciting. So yeah, I mean, I'm still got the bug for sure.
That's so cool. Well, again, I will put all the links in the show description, but thank you so much for your time and thank you for the
Yeah, my
films that
pleasure.
you are making. There's not a lot of films made in our world, so I think it's a really exciting thing, and I'm glad there's somebody out there like you doing it. So, yeah,
Oh, thanks very much.
appreciate it.
And I'm glad that there's an audience out there. It's hard to it's not an obvious audience, and I'm always convinced there's people out there that want to watch these films. It's hard to convince distributors. I'm hoping when we release Electronic Voyager, that's 3 feature documentaries. I'm hoping after that we might be able to get a film properly funded so we can get it out in a year instead of 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
that's my goal.
yeah. Keep me in the loop on all things Waveshaper Media. I'm excited to dig into that stuff you mentioned earlier on your YouTube channel,
Oh
and
yeah, definitely check
yeah.
that out. There's tons of stuff. There's actually a really cool couple of shorts we did when I went to Iceland and
Oh,
explored the
nice.
city there. So yeah,
Okay.
there's some really
Cool.
cool stuff on there. So yeah, check it out.
Very cool. Well, thanks again for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's great talking to you.
Thank you so much for coming back to Podular Modcast. Thank you to Robert from Waveshaper Media for coming on the show. Thank you for coming back. And if this is your first time, then welcome. Big thanks to Patchworks, Novation, After Later Audio, and 4MS for their continued support. Speaking of support, if you'd like to help out, head over to patreon.com/PodularModcast or PodularModcast.com and check out the store. This week's secret word is Mort. Until next week.